what was a 2-month-year-old, what was a 2-year-old wearing to justify that child to be defiled? What was an 8-year-old grandmother wearing to justify for that person to be raped? Women should be themselves. You should not be told if you wear short dresses, you're calling men to rape you. No. Women should be themselves. Men should be told how to behave and not be told, not to tell women to tame themselves to control the behavior of another person. Sometimes we hear these perceptions that we are adults. If I take you to my house or you go to a certain place, the perception is you should expect or know what should happen.
There's actually a friend of mine who told me that once you're raped as a woman, the chances of it happening to you again are higher than a woman who's never been raped. Is that true? Hello guys, welcome back to the Vibe Tribe podcast. My name is Sarah Nicole and I am joined again by Leticia. If you haven't watched the previous episode, do make sure to check it down in the description box below. And on this episode, we will be doing a myth versus fact segment where I will be mentioning myths about violence, not only against women, this is across the board, and she will be debunking the misconceptions for us. So, shall we dive into it? Okay. So, myth number 1, it's only abuse if it's physical. Misconception being, many people think violence against women is limited to physical abuse like hitting or slapping. Yeah.
That is a myth. Violence, as it has been defined, and let me just start by saying that gender-based violence is an act of violence, threat, or harm that is inflicted upon a person because of their gender. So for violence, physical violence is just one of them, one aspect of any form of violence. And then we have sexual violence, where it's violence that has been inflicted upon person using the form of sexual coercion or sexual penetration. And then we have emotional violence, which is the mental well-being of this person is affected either through intimidation, threats to kill, threats to harm that have been used by words. It can even also be by action. And then we have economic violence, is where someone is deprived the economic gain, or rather they're being denied that opportunity to actually gain some form of economy in a setup that can be intimate or not in an intimate relationship. And then you have harmful practices, that these are cultural practices that are within various cultures that are being practices especially against women to just have some sort of either control over them or rather to just subdue them. So physical violence is just one of them.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so second, it's a private family matter. The misconception being that domestic violence is often seen as a private issue between a couple and outsiders should not intervene.
It's a myth. As per our constitution, Article 29, it talks about that every person has a right to be protected from any form of torture, cruel or inhumane treatment, whether in public or in private spaces. So whether it's happening in private, whether it's happening in private or public, violence, it's a no-no. Like every person is entitled to be protected. They have a right to life. They have a right to be protected by law, whether it's in private or public. They have a right to dignity, whether it's in private or public. They have a right to get that healthcare, because you see now, even if you say it's a private affair, yes, family, we tend to see that it's more of a private thing. But then doesn't mean that violence should not now be dealt with when it happens in a private setup. Because even if you look at the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act, it talks about that intimate partner violence. So it's something that if it happens within that private space, it is still violence. Yes.
Okay. If she doesn't leave, it's not that bad. Misconception being, people assume if a woman stays with her abuser, the abuse isn't serious or she must be okay with it.
It's a misconception because one thing we normally also say is we try not to do victim blaming, because there's so many factors that undergo when a victim survivor especially chooses to stay in a violent marriage. Because sometimes you find majority of the victim survivor, and especially if it's when it's women, there's that power imbalance. You find if you're, let's say, a housewife,
Yeah.
you don't have any sort of economic power to step out of that violent marriage. You have kids, you're being threatened. If you walk away, you're not getting anything. You find sometimes either maybe you're not legally married. So, in terms of also maybe the setup that is ongoing in terms of the violence, you find most victims, women, victim survivors, they have that fear of, if I walk away, this person is my source of income, this person is my economic power. You find either maybe you came out of a very hostile situation, maybe at home things are not okay, education wise, you don't have anything in terms of also maybe just sustaining yourself. It's not really promising. So you find most victim survivors, they tend to choose the lesser evil than the unknown evil. So it's just about not really blaming, but to just understand that person and to try and offer the best support that you can give them.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's actually a very powerful image of senior in your office.
Yes.
So it reads, if you're silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it.
Yes.
That is quite impactful.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's
Yes.
and
Just encourages that people should come out.
yeah.
Because over the years, or rather over many strides that women in this space when it comes to gender-based violence, we have taken that step of creating a safe space for women to come out and tell their stories. We can even see from that Protection Against Domestic Violence Act, as I've mentioned, it talks about even anonymously reporting. We have whistleblowers, we have people within the community. Nowadays, we have Nyumba Kumi. It's just calling upon people to see that violence, it's more of a community initiative that we should take to ensure that people are not subjected to any form of violence. So it's more of calling people to speak out, but you're also not judging you for not speaking out, but you're encouraging you to just come out and speak out. You may not even go to court, but you see, out of that process, we normally say there are three forms of justice that a victim survivor, when it comes to GBV, they get. There's the one for the courts, there's the one for the medical, and then there's the one for, I think, integrating your life beyond the form of violence that you've gone through. Once you go through the court system, of course, once you report to the police, it's taken to the courts, this person is convicted, that is a form of justice. Health justice, of course, it's to manage your mental well-being, to manage if it was sexually violated, if it was physical, to manage that well-being. That is also a form of justice, to just have that healing journey that we had talked about. And then the one that now, in terms of how to now adapt life beyond the violence. You know, some instances the person might not get convicted. So how now do you also live beyond that? So those are some of the ways that we try also to integrate in terms of how we approach clients who are victims and survivors of gender-based violence.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So only poor or uneducated women are affected. Misconception being violence against women is often associated with lower socioeconomic classes or lack of education.
I would read for that one, it's more of a misconception and a myth because, like I mentioned, most people who are the largest number of victims, survivors who are prone to be violated, of course, it also depends on the background that you come with. For example, if you're in a poor, and maybe just for lack of a better word, if your status are not really well off, you're prone to be violated more compared to a person whose status is somehow balanced or a bit well off. Because you see now, from you being in that status, there's an intersection of you now not having that economic power. And also the intersection of now you not being educated, it will actually also not work for you. But I'm not saying that uneducated women or girls are prone more to being violated, but it depends circumstances. So it's more of also an empower balance, because you find if you belong to such categories, you're prone, because of that just challenge, of course, especially in terms of economic value. definitely your perpetrator or abuser might be holding the power so that it becomes so easy for you now to be violated.
Yeah.
Yes.
And not speak up against
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So, number 5, she provoked him. Misconception being people often believe a woman must have provoked her abuser into acting violently.
Violence cannot be justified. Violence cannot be justified. If someone violates you, they have committed a crime. If they want to justify, they will justify in their own defense. But the aspect of saying that you provoked someone does not correlate that you have to respond it in a violent way.
Yeah.
Provocation, what sometimes I tend to be a bit confused when someone says you provoked. And in law, in crime, we say sometimes someone can provoke you to go and steal a bank. The person who provoked will not be arrested. The person who does the act to go and steal the bank is the one who's going to be arrested, because the provocation does not, in a way,
Ensure that you
ensure. Yes, there's so many ways you could walk away. You could not engage. There's a way you can just deal with it. But there's no justification for being violent. If violence occurs, it's violence that has occurred, and provocation, it doesn't matter whether you say it's something that there's a way you can just amicably address that situation.
True.
Without using any form of violence.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, men cannot control their anger. Misconception being some people believe men cannot control their anger and that violence is a natural response to stress or provocation.
That one is a very high misconception, because I believe we all adapt to life or situations very differently. There's some situations you find people are prone not to act angrily. And it just takes that mental awareness to understand the consequences of handling situations, maybe differently or badly.
Yeah.
So it's more of, we can't really pinpoint, unless maybe it's a study that has been done. It has actually found that this person actually, when you say certain things, it triggers something. But that can actually be a general statement, because I think we build different.
Yeah.
And how you respond to situations also depends with how also you understand how to respond.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you say, you find some people when they're burnt with like hot tea, they will jump and scream. Others will just be, you won't even know something is happening inside that mouth. So it's more of like, it depends with how someone reacts to anger. But yeah, for me, I think it's more of a misconception. Yes, but what I advise is, if you are aware that you're an angry person, for me, I would advise is for you to take just that action. Either speak out, maybe for someone to at least help you to manage. It doesn't even have to be professional, but just speak out in a way that you say, these are things that make me angry. These are things that trigger me. I'm not a violent, or I'm a violent person. So at least you seek some sort of help, because the more you also churn it in, it tends to build some form of anger that when it erupts, now it becomes also a problem.
True.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just a one-time thing.
Yeah.
Misconception being, after an incident of violence, people often believe it's a one-time occurrence that won't happen again.
It's more of a myth than a misconception, because we're not saying that once you've undergone some form of violence, you're, what's the word? You're prone to actually undergo some form of violence, maybe differently.
Yeah.
Because, like I mentioned, is situations are different, and how you manage the first incidents will determine your next steps of life. And that's why you find sometimes, if it's like you've had child trauma, it might actually build to be now adult trauma, and then you transfer that trauma to someone else. So that it becomes now a cycle of just people being violated out of just one incident. So you see some instances like that. So it's more of how one incident is managed, but we really just can't say because one person is violated once, they're prone to be violated again.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's just more to just call people to just be aware of when situations happen, how to just take that step.
Yeah.
And of course, the law is there to also protect instances such as that. But it's just to create that self-awareness, people just to be aware of such incidents and just to know how to respond when it occurs.
Okay.
Yes.
There's actually a friend of mine who told me that once you're raped as a woman, the chances of it happening to you again are higher than a woman who's never been raped. Is that true?
To be honest, that one I wouldn't say it's true, or I wouldn't really base a finding on it because, like I mentioned, violence occurs in different ways. And it's not like we are calling out people to be, what is it called, like rape detectors, or you have like rape tentacles to know if you're going to be raped or next.
Yeah.
Violence can happen to anyone at any time. But it just calls for us to just be aware of our surroundings, to just be that safe. We're not saying that women should feel like they're unsafe everywhere they go, but these are incidents that happen in the communities, in the areas that we live. But it doesn't mean, because that will also be victim, what's the word?
Blaming.
Not even about blaming, but we are torturing the ones who have already is it re-victimizing again? Because if you put such a statement, it makes someone, in terms of also the healing journey, they feel that they have already been marked. That, yes, I'm a rape victim, so I will forever be a rape victim. No, it's not true. And as I'm saying, it just calls that situations are different.
Yeah.
We live in a community that is somehow dangerous and not dangerous. But it just calls for people to just be aware, to know about these things, that yes, rape is something that the law is actually has protected women against it. There's violence that the law actually identifies that people undergo violence. Doesn't mean that you have to have a law. Uh, uh, okay, it doesn't mean that because it's not happening, we don't need those to be protected. But it just calls for you to just be aware that there's physical violence, there's sexual violence, there's this form of violence. It might not happen to you, but if it has happened to you, that at least just be aware that this is something that the law recognizes and you are entitled to be protected.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So women can avoid violence by changing their behavior. Misconception. There's a belief that women can prevent violence by dressing modestly or avoiding confrontation and being obedient.
I'll even start with that, the one for dressing. Sometimes we tend to use this example. It's not one of the best, but you ask yourself, what was a 2-month-year-old, what was a 2-year-old wearing to justify that child to be defiled? What was an 8-year-old grandmother wearing to justify for that person to be raped? So what I'm just trying to drive at as is there's no justification for someone to be violated. There's no justification for someone to be beaten up to death. There's no justification for someone to be subjected in a cultural practices that is just causing harm to them. There's no justification. And I believe in this aspect of everyone has dignity to be given the respect that they deserve. The same pain that you're inflicting on them, try to also imagine that pain on you. So try to measure that dignity, or that this person is a human being. They're just not a punching object to just be whatever. Because as much as also sometimes also try not to compare, we see that the law tries to protect even property. If you just walk into someone's property and you damage it completely, action is going to be taken to you. So the value that also property has been protected in that way, for humans actually supposed to be way higher, because right to life is very key. So in terms of the mode of dressing, for me, I am also a preacher of women should be themselves. You should not be told if you wear short dresses, you're calling men to rape you. No. Women should be themselves. Men should be told how to behave and not be told, not to tell women to tame themselves to control the behavior of another person. It's just that people should take the responsibility, and when someone says no, no means no.
True.
Yes.
No does mean no.
Yes.
She didn't say no, so it's not assault. misconception. People sometimes think that if a woman did not explicitly say no, then it can't be termed as sexual assault.
When it comes to sexual assault, sexual offenses, there's this aspect of consent. Sometimes there's a thin line on how people understand consent. Sometimes you hear these perceptions that we are adults. If I take you to my house or you go to a certain place, the perception is you should expect or know what should happen. For me, sometimes when I engage with the community or other young people, I tell them, what is so wrong of you just telling someone that you want to have sex with them? To express yourself so that they are informed that this is what you happened or this is what you want, so that at least they consent to say that, yes, I also want to engage. The fact that even if the person didn't say no does not mean that they consented. Even if I behave in a certain way, it doesn't justify for you to assume that I have consented or have agreed for that something to be happening. Because one of the things that when it comes to sexual offenses, the aspect of consent, it can actually be forced, it can actually be coerced. So it really calls upon, we're even getting to that point that even if you want to engage with someone in some sexual interaction, you even have to sign, but I'm not saying that we get there. But we're just encouraging for people to just communicate so that that aspect of consent, it's informed. So that someone doesn't have that perception because, yes, I'm an adult, I should just comply or I should just assume that I know. No. For me, what I encourage, and especially when I talk to young people, just express yourself. It might feel so uncomfortable, but it's better to just be open, have that communication, so that someone is able to tell you that yes. And sometimes so consent can be withdrawn within the action. You also have to be aware of that. So it's something that is very thin or rather misunderstood. But for me is the fact that someone didn't say no does not mean that it was an okay for you to violate them. No. Yes.
Yeah, because that's a very touchy topic. Yeah. Okay. It was just an argument, not abuse. Statement being, some think that a heated argument or occasional shouting does not qualify as abuse.
Also, it depends with the situation. So I'm going to give a lawyer answer in this. But sometimes you see when, have you ever seen those debates? You see, like for us lawyers, when you go to court, sometimes you might be exchanging words. And in some sort of what setup, someone might feel like you're arguing. So it really depends. And one aspect I'll touch is the aspect of emotional and psychological abuse, where there's the use of words. The context is, for example, if words of to cause you harm, threatening you, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to do this. You have to see there's some aspects that demonstrate that this actually demonstrates some form of violence. So, of course, if it's a heated debate, sometimes people argue passionately. When it comes to politics, you find people are up and about telling you, no, this is my stand. When it comes to sports, like I'm a fan of Manchester United. If you come for me, you will see. You will see. So it really depends. So the context is, of course, if there's any indication of the conversation has some form of threats to cause you harm, then that qualifies as a form of violence. Yes. Yes.
Finally, we have some women like to be dominated. Statement being, there is a harmful belief that some women enjoy being controlled or dominated by their partner, and it's their choice. Is that abuse?
We do acknowledge that we do live in a patriarchal society. And patriarchal, I am not saying that it is men, because sometimes it's misunderstood. Patriarchal is just a system that has been built that women should live this and men should be like this. So you find that system has built a perception or a misunderstanding that, like the way we mentioned, as for you to really know that your man loves you, they have to beat you. For you to know that someone, especially you're being well taken care of, some form of discriminatory, some infliction of pain has to occur for you to feel like you're truly being loved. So, in terms of dominance, the same thing we call everyone has the right to be dignified,
Yeah.
to be given of equal status. That is what even the law recognizes, that we are all equal in terms of before the law, and we deserve equal protection.
Yeah.
So, in terms of just justifying that men should actually maybe have some control over men, it's not right, and it should not also be promoted because we are all equal in some form of way. So, we should be given the same respect.
Yeah.
Yes, and should not open that room of justifying that this thing should be done. And it's also discriminatory because why is it just against women? It should cut across, but I'm not saying that violence should be promoted in such a way. But what I'm just aiming at is we are all equal, and we should be treated in dignity and respected in the same status.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. So we've come to the end of the episode. Thank you so much, Leticia, for joining us
Thank
again.
you. Thank you.
As we come to the close of the episode, please do leave a like on the video. Do share it with a friend who might be facing abuse. As you've heard, there are some very big misconceptions out there about abuse, as we've heard it from Leticia. So, bye bye.